Imagine discovering a secret to wood preservation so powerful it could make your fences and decks last for centuries, not just years. A secret buried by an industry that profits from you replacing them every decade. I'm holding the proof right here. This board, pulled from a fence installed in 1887, shows no rot, no graying. Its grain is tight and dark, and when I press my thumbnail into the wood, it doesn't give, not even slightly. I'm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where it's 34 degrees Celsius, and this post has endured every summer since Grover Cleveland was president. 6 months ago, I would have called someone a liar for telling me that was possible. For 30 years, I routinely replaced fence posts every decade and watched decks turn gray within 3 years, spending unnecessary money on treatments that never lasted. I genuinely believed this was just the nature of wood, but I was wrong. That's not how wood works at all. There's a formula, 3 simple ingredients, costing less than $2 per application, that the modern wood treatment industry deliberately buried starting in the 1940s. I uncovered the undeniable proof in Mennonite agricultural records from Lancaster County. Genuine entries, specific dates, and a precise technique meticulously noted in the margins of old farm maintenance logs. A secret no YouTube channel or home improvement magazine has ever dared to discuss. And what I'm about to reveal isn't just for new construction. It works wonders on wood that's already graying, cracking, or currently installed in your yard. What I discovered next stopped me cold. The oldest known pine tar production facility on Earth was unearthed in Sweden, radiocarbon dated to between 540 and 380 BCE. That's right, not a typo. Over 2,500 years ago, Scandinavian craftsmen were already processing pine resin into a wood preservative so incredibly effective that Vikings, centuries later, used it to seal their longships for treacherous North Sea crossings. These vessels endured some of the planet's harshest conditions: relentless salt spray, freezing temperatures, and constant moisture. Yet the wood remained intact for journeys that spanned months. Pliny the Elder documented this exact chemistry in 23 AD. Roman builders regularly mixed pitch and linseed oil on structural timber, understanding a fundamental principle that modern contractors have seemingly been paid to forget. This wasn't folk medicine or old wives' tales. It was the engineering standard for every civilization that relied on wood to last for generations. By the late 1600s, pine tar had become Sweden's third largest export commodity, famously known as Stockholm tar. The British Royal Navy depended on it completely, as did colonial shipyards spanning the eastern seaboard. This is the true origin of the nickname Tar Heels, not a football mascot, but a testament to a profound industrial legacy. North Carolina's pine tar production was so immense, it supplied the naval infrastructure of an entire empire. The formula these historical builders used was remarkably simple. Boiled linseed oil, pressed from flax seeds, and treated with metallic drying agents to accelerate curing. Genuine turpentine, distilled directly from pine resin, and pine tar, all mixed in specific ratios in a jar and applied with a rag. This combination achieves something no synthetic product has ever fully replicated. It doesn't just coat the surface of the wood, it penetrates deep within. Linseed oil, a triglyceride rich in alpha-linolenic acid, a polyunsaturated fatty acid, reacts with oxygen inside the wood fibers through a process called autooxidation. These fatty acid chains cross-link, forming a flexible polymer network that fills every microscopic pore from the inside out. Penn State Extension researchers confirmed that boiled linseed oil penetrates up to 4 times deeper into wood fiber than polyurethane. 4 times deeper. And crucially, unlike polyurethane, this protection forms within the grain, not merely on top of it. But there's a second ingredient in this formula that completely transforms its effectiveness: And the story of its disappearance from hardware store shelves is one of the most deliberately ignored chapters in American building history. I had always assumed that what you find at a hardware store is what has always existed. I thought turpentine was just turpentine, and that if they sold it, it worked the same way it always did. This assumption cost me decades of unnecessary maintenance. Genuine turpentine is distilled directly from the living resin of pine trees. When a pine tree is wounded by a broken branch or an insect boring into its bark, it immediately floods that wound with resin. This resin, chemically engineered over millions of years of biological pressure, accomplishes three vital tasks simultaneously. It repels insects, halts fungal growth, and permanently seals the damaged wood against moisture. That's pine resin. When you distill it, you get real turpentine, which smells distinctly like Christmas trees. And that's precisely what this formula requires. However, what big box stores sell today, labeled as turpentine, is not that at all. It's a petroleum derivative, a synthetic industrial solvent that shares only a name with the original product and almost nothing else chemically. It has a sharp, unpleasant chemical odor and lacks all the biological compounds that made genuine turpentine so effective on wood over the long term. This substitution happened quietly during the post-World War II pro-chemical boom, when synthetic solvents became dramatically cheaper to produce than harvesting pine resin at scale. The longleaf pine forests that once supplied genuine turpentine production across the American South had been heavily deforested. The industry saw a clear opportunity: replace a natural product with a synthetic one, market it under the same name, and move on. The profit margins were better, the supply more predictable, and, conveniently, no one organized a campaign to inform homeowners that what they were now buying, despite bearing the same label, was entirely different from what their grandparents used. Genuine turpentine, derived from pine resin, is still available today, though you won't find it at major home improvement chains. It comes from specialty suppliers, sometimes imported from Portugal or France, where longleaf pine forests are still managed for resin harvesting. While it costs more per liter than the synthetic version, it is the essential ingredient that makes this formula perform as it's meant to. Pine tar, the third component, amplifies everything. It's produced by heating the resin-saturated heartwood of old-growth pine until it breaks down into a thick, dark, aromatic liquid. This liquid carries every protective compound the tree accumulated over decades of self-defense: antifungal acids, insect-repelling terpenes, and resin compounds that bond permanently to wood fiber. When you work it into a fence post or a deck board, you're essentially reinstating the tree's own immune system back into the wood it came from. This formula, boiled linseed oil, genuine turpentine, and pine tar, costs approximately $2 per application per board, based on current material prices. The protection is entirely internal. A scratch on the surface won't compromise it because there's no film to crack, no surface coating at all. Therefore, when synthetic products flooded the market in the 1940s and 1950s, traditional builders who knew this formula didn't abandon it because something better had arrived. They were simply never told they had a choice, and within just one generation, this invaluable knowledge stopped being passed down. When I finally understood all of this, my immediate thought went to my own house, built in 1974. Nothing special. Cedar siding on the back, a fence around the property. I had repainted twice in 15 years, and a set of wooden porch posts were starting to check and gray along the grain. I wasn't building from scratch or starting a new project with fresh lumber. I was dealing with 50 years of installed, weathered, existing wood, and I want to tell you exactly what I did, because it's something you can easily do this weekend. I went to a hardware store and bought a liter of boiled linseed oil for $8. I then ordered half a liter of genuine turpentine from a specialty supplier online for $14, more than I needed for this project. My total material cost was $22, making the cost per application less than $2. I started with the fence. Using a stiff, natural bristle brush, I simply swept loose dirt and cobwebs off the boards. No power washing, no sanding, no chemical stripping required. I mixed equal parts boiled linseed oil and genuine turpentine in a wide-mouth glass jar, sealed the lid, and shook it for 30 seconds until it clouded into a golden emulsion. Then, using a clean cotton rag, I applied it with firm strokes along the grain, working in 6-0-centimeter sections to allow the liquid ample time to absorb before moving on. What happened on that first board stopped me in my tracks. The gray, oxidized layer on the cedar visibly dissolved within 30 seconds of contact. The golden oil flooded into the exposed grain so rapidly I could literally watch it disappear into the wood. The board changed color in real time, transforming from a washed-out silver to a warm, tight, dark grain, just like it looked when it was first installed. I let the first coat absorb for 15 minutes, wiped any excess with a dry cloth, and moved to the next section. Within 2 hours, I had covered the entire fence, and within 48 hours, the wood had settled into a color and texture I hadn't seen on that fence since I moved in. I tackled the porch posts the following morning with the same method and the same astonishing result. Next, I treated the cedar siding on the back of the house, which had been silvering and beginning to lift at the edges. One application, 40 minutes of work. The siding instantly looked 10 years younger. Not painted, mind you. The grain was still fully visible, transformed from the inside out. For a 6-0-meter linear fence, the total material cost, using this formula's dilution, runs between $15 and $20. The contractor estimate I had received for the same job was a staggering $1,100. I completed it on a Saturday afternoon, and the result was superior to any refinishing job I'd seen attempted with commercial products on my street. For dense hardwoods like oak posts, hickory tool handles, or structural beams, there's a heat application method that takes this even further. You gently warm the boiled linseed oil to about 60 degrees Celsius using a double boiler, never over an open flame. Then, you apply it to wood you've also slightly warmed with a heat gun. Hot oil penetrates 3 to 4 times deeper than cold application on dense grain. A single treatment performed this way can protect a structural beam for 10 to 15 years. Now, a crucial safety note I will not skip, because it is non-negotiable. Rags soaked with linseed oil can spontaneously combust if left bunched in a pile. The curing process releases heat, and a crumpled rag traps that heat, potentially reaching ignition temperature on its own. A fire started by linseed oil-soaked rags in Philadelphia in 1991 tragically killed 3 firefighters. Always spread your application rags flat outdoors to dry completely, or submerge them in water in a sealed metal container before disposal. Every can of boiled linseed oil states this on the label. Read it and follow it. This formula is safe when handled correctly, but dangerous when it is not. Now, let me tell you why this knowledge costs a mere $2 to implement, yet requires $15 billion per year to suppress. The wood treatment and deck product market in the United States generates over $15 billion annually in revenue. That staggering number is sustained by one core operational assumption, that you will return to the hardware store every 2 to 3 years because whatever you bought last time simply wore out. Brands like Thompson's Water Seal, Cabot Australian Timber Oil, Ready Seal, and Olympic are not fraudulent products. Their chemistry functions. However, the active ingredient in the majority of oil-based wood restoration products is the same drying oil mechanism that has existed since before the Roman Empire. They are essentially selling you linseed oil chemistry, enhanced with synthetic additives and a recognizable logo, at a markup between 10 and 50 times the raw material cost. In 2003, the EPA forced the residential lumber treatment industry to cease using CCA, or chromated copper arsenate, on lumber sold for home use. Arsenic. Yes, the industry had been treating the wood in children's playground equipment and backyard decks with a substance containing arsenic, and it took significant regulatory pressure to finally end it. The builders who relied on the linseed oil and pine tar system never needed the EPA to intervene. Their formula was already inherently safe, demonstrably effective, and proven by 2,000 years of continuous use across multiple continents. The formula cannot be patented. You cannot patent linseed oil. It's a natural product that predates the patent system by centuries. You cannot patent vinegar, turpentine, or pine tar. There's no proprietary molecule, no trade secret, no intellectual property to protect. And what cannot be patented cannot generate licensing revenue. What cannot generate licensing revenue cannot be advertised. And what isn't advertised disappears from public knowledge, one generation at a time, until a homeowner staring at a gray deck types a query into a search engine. Then, the first page of results is dominated by sponsored products, selling them the very chemistry of linseed oil in a branded bottle at 40 times the raw material cost. This isn't a conspiracy. It's simply a market that rewards complexity and punishes simplicity. The $2 solution doesn't get promoted. It has no marketing budget, no television commercial. So, it vanishes, and the cycle continues. But there's a final, crucial step I haven't mentioned yet. The reason some wooden structures survive 150 to 200 years isn't solely due to the oil treatment. I discovered this missing piece in a source I almost overlooked: a digitized archive of Mennonite agricultural records from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, farm management logs from the 1800s. Within those logs, I found building maintenance notes scrawled in pencil in the margins. I was searching for application quantities and ratios, but what I found instead was a phrase repeated across multiple entries in multiple years. After oil cure, wax coat. After oil cure, wax coat. The secret was beeswax. After the boiled linseed oil treatment had cured for 48 hours, traditional builders applied a final coat of beeswax, melted with a small amount of warm linseed oil. The wax was worked into the surface while still liquid, using a soft cloth, then wiped smooth. It set within hours to a low, warm sheen. Here's why that step changes everything. Linseed oil is extraordinarily effective at protecting wood internally against moisture and fungi, but it has one specific vulnerability that the modern woodworking world rarely discusses: ultraviolet light. Prolonged UV exposure over many years will gradually break down the oil's polymer chains at the outermost surface layer, leading to slow surface graying, even in treated wood. While manageable with annual maintenance coats, beeswax addresses this entirely differently. Beeswax contains naturally occurring UV-absorbing compounds, the very reason honeybees build their combs from it. It resists degradation from sunlight. When applied over fully cured linseed oil, the wax creates an external barrier against ultraviolet radiation that the oil alone cannot provide. The oil protects the interior of the wood against moisture and biological decay, while the wax protects the oil itself against solar degradation at the surface. One works from the inside out, the other from the outside in. Applied together in sequence, they address every single mechanism through which wood fails. A 500-gram block of beeswax costs $8 and treats an entire fence. Applied once every 5 to 7 years over an existing linseed oil-treated surface, it extends the protection almost indefinitely. The total materials to treat a fence that will last a century, approximately $25 for a one-time application. The Mennonite records note this step so routinely that the writers clearly assumed any reader would already know the oil application came first. By the time those records were written, the combined system was so standard it barely warranted explanation. No one buried it intentionally. The synthetic product revolution simply made it irrelevant to manufacturers. And that irrelevance became invisibility. This invisibility lasted long enough that an entire generation of American homeowners never heard of it until now. I spent 30 years replacing wood that never needed to be replaced, paying for refinishing jobs, contractor visits, and branded products for surfaces that could have lasted a lifetime with $25 of materials and one afternoon of work. That's not just a home improvement story. That's 30 years of a system operating exactly as it was designed to operate. You and I now share a secret that $15 billion a year depends on us not knowing. 3 ingredients: equal parts oil and turpentine, with pine tar for exterior posts. 1 final wax coat after the cure. A glass jar and a cotton rag. This formula is not complicated enough to forget. Before you go, I have one specific request. Find the oldest piece of wood on your property right now. A fence post, a porch beam, a window frame, barn siding, and leave me a comment with the year it was installed. Just the year, nothing else. I want to see how long the industry has been telling you that wood is time supposed, times to fail. Write it right there below this video. I will read every single one. This wood treatment is just one of 5 systems detailed in the Vitality Blueprint Home System Guide. It's a complete, step-by-step approach to cutting every household bill to zero, using methods that were standard before the industry decided you should keep paying. Energy, water, fuel, heat, wood, all covered, for any home you already own. You can find the link in the description below. If you know someone currently looking at a contractor quote for a fence or a deck, share this with them today, not tomorrow. The quote expires, but this formula does not. I keep uncovering hidden knowledge like this. The next revelation will be about wood shingles, treated with a technique that costs almost nothing per square meter, a method the insurance industry has quietly worked very hard to ensure never appears in any guide homeowners actually read. That story is coming soon. Stay close.